It's Washington Examiner Wednesday here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, and as the presidential debate, the second and final one, is getting ready to happen tomorrow night, we're going to dive into the current state of play with the race with Mica Soellner, breaking news reporter at the Washington Examiner, as Jimmy at the Crossroads with yours truly, Jimmy Sengenberger, starts right now.
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program. Once again, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. If you have not done so already, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. And of course, like the video, share it, all those good things. We appreciate your support here on this program. And of course, don't forget to check out WashingtonExaminer.com for all the latest news and exceptional commentary available from our partners at the Examiner. Today is Washington Examiner Wednesday, which means we're going to dive into issues of the day with our friends, someone from the Examiner. And today I'm so pleased to be joined as we talk about the current state of play of the presidential race, which is now less than 2 weeks away with the final debate tomorrow night. I'm so pleased to be joined by Mica Soellner, who is breaking news reporter at the Washington Examiner and joins me now. Mica, welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. So I just want to ask a very broad, big picture question right now, and that is, how do you look at the current state of this race? Because it's 2020. We already have seen that things can change on a dime almost instantaneously. I think it's premature to make any predictions, but what are we looking at?
Yeah, so we're down to the final 2 weeks for what some people, I think, would feel like this has been, in some ways, a 4-year election. Like there's been a lot of preparation to this moment. Obviously, I think we can expect, maybe some people will make up their minds in tomorrow's debate, the final one where voters can see candidates side by side to discuss issues with adjusted rules this time. And we'll also see how voter turnout is this year, given that the coronavirus pandemic has, made different options and challenges, and it's expected to be record high mail-in voting this year. And we've also seen millions of Americans also have already casted their ballots. So it's just a very unconventional year.
Unconventional in so many ways. I think you're right to point out in particular about the mail-in voting. The early voting turnout in some parts of the country has been very strong. Question, of course, is who does that benefit? I mean, there's some that we may say conventional wisdom is that it benefits Democrats because they're turning out early voters, and it seems that Democrats are more confident in the idea of voting by mail. Maybe a lot of Republicans are sitting on the sidelines until Election Day to go vote in person or something. But I think that sort of conventional wisdom that a lot of people think may be misguided. I think there are a lot of Republicans who are revved up and ready to go, who may be voting early at the polling place, for example, and the voter registration numbers for Republicans have been pretty strong.
Absolutely. And I think, I've heard from voters on both sides of the aisle saying that, some people are concerned about, the public health risks of the coronavirus. If they're a high risk, maybe they want to cast that early ballot. And that's not necessarily a partisan thing. I think some of the messages that have come from Democrats and Republicans may have, different interpretations of mail-in voting, or saying, different things of how maybe like you should go to the polls or you should do early voting. But, speaking to voters on the ground, I think it hasn't really been partisan at all. I think it's just their personal preference, and some people, still want to go to the polls and turn out on election day as they've always done.
Yeah, again, we're talking with Mica Soellner, who is breaking news reporter at the Washington Examiner. Let's talk about tomorrow night's debate, because this is the last time that President Trump and Joe Biden will be side by side. And it's really only the second time, because we saw that the last debate ended up being canceled, at least the one that was previously scheduled. What do you make of the dynamics that are in play and what both of these candidates may be looking for coming up in tomorrow night's debate?
Yeah, so it's really just kind of the final time that either, Vice President Biden will be able to pitch his policies, and that President Trump can highlight some of his signature achievements or what he's done in the last 4 years to make that pitch as well. So, it'll be an interesting night. Definitely, there's obviously, as we've seen, adjusted rules to how it's going to be handled after the first debate ended up being a pretty chaotic environment with both candidates kind of talking over each other. So I think, both will try to make their last pitch as to why they should receive the votes of the electorate.
Yeah, when we look at this debate, what's so striking, of course, is the way in which these candidates approach the debates. I mean, we saw the first one where President Trump was very much looking to go at Joe Biden in a way where he was very combative. A lot of people were complaining that the president was interrupting too much. Joe Biden, I think his strategy is more, let me just be on a even keel, not have any flubs, and just get through this thing looking decent enough compared to President Trump. Tomorrow night, I think it's going to be interesting, because one of the things that the debate structure now has is this idea that during the first 2 minutes, when you're asked a question as a candidate, the other candidate's mic is going to be muted, and so there cannot be interruptions. It's just not possible by the other candidate.
Yeah, that's right. And I definitely think the commission did that. So, I guess voters can actually see, what the candidates say. Like the first debate, we obviously saw it's really hard to understand, what someone is proposing or what their plan is when they're just being talked over by somebody else. So it'll definitely be an interesting night. Hopefully that it'll deliver the message that both candidates want to send to voters, and people can get a better idea of who they might be voting for, or who they have voted for already.
Mica Soellner, when we look at the debates, the big question that a lot of people are wondering is how many minds are still up for grabs? That is to say, how many people can be persuaded to either candidate? And is this debate going to make that kind of a mark? I'm not sure that the debates will make a big difference. I think it's important to have the two candidates side by side going toe to toe in this type of a format, because we need to see them both next to each other to compare. But I'm not sure how many people are going to watch the debates, and that debate is just going to finally seal the deal for one candidate or the other.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement to say, given how polarized the environment is right now. I think that, most people have their minds made up right now, especially given that election day is so near. But I do think that there could be still a handful of voters out there who just aren't sure. Perhaps, maybe they don't like either candidate, and maybe they'll watch tomorrow and be like, I'm going to make my final decision. Or we never know what's going to happen in the last 2 weeks either, with both parties or both candidates. Something that could happen or come out that could change somebody's mind. So I think it's never too early or too late to, decide.
Yeah, so let's talk for a moment about some of the stories that you've been reporting on, Mica Soellner, over at the Washington Examiner. One of these is about Pennsylvania and the current state of play there. I mean, this is a key battleground state. It's his childhood home. Of course, he was United States Senator for Delaware, but growing up for a period of time, he was in Pennsylvania. And so there's this idea that maybe Biden could secure Pennsylvania and do pretty well there, but it could go either way. What are the dynamics that are happening there right now?
Yeah, so there's no doubt that Biden has a lot of support in some of the blue cities of Pennsylvania, but he's really made a play to kind of play up his roots there in Scranton, and then later his family has a lot of ties to the Philadelphia area as well. So what I've heard from voters is and I spoke to both voters in Pennsylvania and Delaware, that don't necessarily share that special relationship that most Delawareans do with the Bidens, given his long history to the state. But I think that if Biden were to take Pennsylvania, which obviously is a critical swing state, given that it has 20 electoral votes, what I've heard from experts and strategists is that he has to make inroads in rural areas that have supported Trump in the 2016 campaign, as well as just not just suburban voters, which was my focus for that story.
Yeah, the suburban voters, that's an interesting group because there are certainly, I think, more voters in the suburban areas that seem to be a little more up for grabs, that are open to both candidates. Where you look at urban settings, they tend to be more of a liberal stronghold. Rural settings oftentimes are a stronger location for Republican candidates, including President Trump. In fact, there was a piece I saw in the Wall Street Journal last week that was reporting on how farmers in the Midwest are still on board with President Trump despite the trade war situations that we've seen with China and so forth. Despite some of their concerns about that, they're still on board with the other policies of President Trump. But the suburban voters, that's where there's a lot of intrigue across the country in Pennsylvania and other states.
Yeah, definitely. And we've definitely seen the Trump campaign playing up suburban voters. There's a lot of messages, putting out, claims that if they don't vote for Trump, that perhaps like Democratic leadership would quote unquote destroy the suburbs. So that's rhetoric that's being used in the campaigns. And I think, the Biden campaign's kind of taken up on that as well, has pushed back on that message. But it's definitely a big factor. And I think both campaigns and both candidates recognize that, some of the swing voters do rely in suburban areas and they could be the last ones to make up their own minds. So I think both are really looking to secure those votes.
In terms of campaign strategies in the home stretch, one of the things you're reporting on is that the Biden campaign is generating some kind of malarkey factory. What are they doing there?
Yeah, so this was first reported by the Washington Post, but the campaign is essentially looking to kind of counter message what they consider misinformation, particularly coming from the president. So some of the things that they might be fact checking is, claims that Biden is senile or that he's a socialist. So they'll put out counter messaging talking about Biden's record or like how he's been endorsed by former President Barack Obama and things like that, just to kind of, I guess, send voters an alternative message to what's being spread. We did see this example in, they apparently used an example down in Florida when Trump's message that, apparently like Biden being a socialist or that rhetoric was resonating with some Latino voters down there, obviously a key demographic. So what they did was just send out, the counter message saying, hey, like this is, or what they say, like, this isn't true. This is his record.
Yeah, one of the phrases that Biden likes to use is it's a bunch of malarkey, describing stuff that he claims is false as malarkey. And it is one of those things in this era where people are like, what is actually true? And so it does seem to be that the Biden campaign is wanting to play into that sort of attitude and say, we're checking the facts. We'll see how well that actually pans out. And maybe if the Republicans advance some sort of a similar strategy in this home stretch. Speaking of Joe Biden, and tomorrow night with the debate, this is pretty striking, is that he's hardly been out and about. We're not seeing him campaign all that much. It seems like he's in his basement doing prep maybe for tomorrow night's debate, while President Trump is already back on the campaign trail, going to a number of different states. I'm going to talk after we finish up our conversation with you a little bit about some comments he made in Pennsylvania. We were speaking about Pennsylvania. He was on the ground there just in the last few days, did a campaign rally. So there are some stark differences between the strategy of Trump going out there and mobilizing the base at rallies as best he can, and meanwhile, the Democrats have Joe Biden not making much as far as appearances.
Yeah, I think President Trump has a lot of energy, and he's doing this all after he had actually contracted COVID. So I think that's definitely part of his strategy, is to be out there and be present and garner, support face to face with people. And I think, Biden's making a play, although given his age, maybe he might be more susceptible to getting the virus. So, but a lot of his strategy is virtual. But that could also like impact voters, I think, who may view it as, a safe bet that he's being careful about public health. So both are interesting strategies. They're very different, obviously, given the state of the pandemic. But yeah, I think we'll see. I think it's all going to depend on who turns out, because I don't necessarily know how many people are attending rallies at the moment, given the restrictions and things like that happening with the coronavirus. But Trump's definitely been out there.
Wrapping up with you, Mica Soellner, again, breaking news reporter at the Washington Examiner. As we look at this next, now just under 2 weeks to Election Day, with voting, of course, already underway in so many states around the country, what do you think folks should be watching for in particular?
I think there's going to be a lot of last minute, I don't want to say attacks, but perhaps some things that come out. Both sides are going to be trying to pitch their own, plans. Trump will definitely be trying to highlight his agenda over the past 4 years, hopefully. But I do think some of the other developments that have been coming out recently, regarding Joe Biden's son and things like that, may continue to play a role in the last 2 weeks. Now, whether that resonates with people, I can't say, and I don't know. But I think that's going to be a further development. But they'll both be making their final pitch to voters.
Yeah, that is one thing I'm wondering, and I'm wondering how President Trump. One thing I'm wondering is how President Trump will squeeze into the debate tomorrow night the Hunter Biden questions, particularly because I doubt that the moderator is going to ask anything about Hunter Biden, although you never know. We'll see what happens. Mica Soellner, breaking news reporter at the Washington Examiner. Always great to check in with you guys. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it, Mica.
Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, Mica Soellner, breaking news reporter at the Washington Examiner, joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Always great to check in with our friends at the Washington Examiner, especially on a Washington Examiner Wednesday. Been a little bit since we've done one, so I am was very pleased to have Mica Soellner on the program. Just a couple thoughts before we wrap up today's edition of the program on the race between Trump and Biden. Look, of course, Joe Biden's strategy is let me hide in my basement so that I don't say anything stupid. That's what it comes down to, is I don't want to take any risks, any unnecessary chances as a gaffe machine. And so if I can just hide in my basement and focus on debate prep for Thursday night, then I'm going to be in a stronger position. Meanwhile, President Trump is thinking, nope, I need to get out there. And I need to speak to my base. I need to rally my base in person, get people together in large numbers, and get them motivated, revved up, and ready to go. The question will be, which strategy is the stronger one? Which is the more effective one? Here is an example of President Trump in Pennsylvania, in Erie, Pennsylvania. I think this was over the weekend. And he gave a speech to a very strong crowd in Pennsylvania, where he talked specifically about oil and gas issues, but he didn't just talk. He showed a video of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talking about opposing fracking and banning fracking. Take a look at this clip.
Tonight I want to do something. I want to give you, this is an original Donald Trump Broadway play. And I had it done specifically, first time I've ever pulled it out. I had it done specifically for the people of Erie, because you guys like energy. You like being energy independent. Do you like that? Energy? Because that's, we don't need all these faraway lands and everything else. We are now energy independent, and we're going to keep it that way. Take a look at this clip. We had it made up, and I think you'll like, first time I've ever done this, right? First time. Go ahead, wherever it is, put it up.
Would there be any place for fossil fuels, including coal and fracking, in a Biden administration?
No, we would work it out. We would make sure it's eliminated and no more subsidies for either one of those. I guarantee you. We're going to end fossil fuel. No new fracking.
I'd gradually move away from fracking.
And I think it's critically important on day one that we end any fossil fuel leases on public lands.
Well, like, what about, say, stopping fracking and stopping pipeline infrastructure and
They want to do the same thing I want to do. They want to phase out fossil fuels, and we're going to phase out fossil fuels.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Large boos in the crowd. Look, I thought that was brilliant, and here's why. Because President Trump is doing two things at these rallies. Number one, he is getting his base energized. I went to a rally in February in Colorado Springs, and the base was thoroughly engaged. The base was enthused, energized, left feeling like they had seen a show. That's what Donald Trump is doing at these rallies. He's putting on a show so that his base, his supporters, will be so excited after they leave that they're going to go cast their ballot if they haven't done so already. They're going to go tell their friends. They're going to be motivated. He's not speaking to the cameras of people who are watching in the media from their perches. He is speaking to the crowd there, hoping that then they will go disseminate their enthusiasm and share it with others. And it works. It worked in 2016. We'll see how well it works here in terms of victory, but it certainly is a critical, motivating element for President Trump in his campaigns. And that's something that I think cannot and should not be understated, because an election is all about turnout, and turnout relies upon voter enthusiasm. Antipathy towards a candidate like the Democrats are playing on to get Joe Biden to beat Donald Trump can only take you so far. It can only take you so far to be blasting a candidate versus supporting a candidate. For President Trump, what he's trying to do is motivate and energize his base to support him, to go out and vote for him, not just against Joe Biden. However, this brings me to point number two for what he's doing in the rallies. He's highlighting issues specific to local communities. In Pennsylvania, fracking is very important, highlighting energy independence, highlighting the role of fracking in these communities in terms of the economy is absolutely important. And he's localizing it to Erie, Pennsylvania. That's a negative attack against his opponents that we just saw. That mixes in with the enthusiasm, the energy, the go ahead and leave my rally revved up and ready to vote for me. Ready to tell your friends and your family that they should absolutely vote for Donald J. Trump for president. But he also has to get in there, and I think he's doing so pretty effectively, some direct and localized attacks against his opponents, against the Biden-Harris ticket. And it's working out in a lot of ways, just as it did in 2016. But make no mistake, the Trump strategy in going out on the campaign trail and speaking is not playing to the cameras. That's what a lot of people think about. They're like, oh, I don't know how this plays, this attack, this and that. There are a lot of things where he's going on. Look, in the rally back in February, President Trump went on and on and on about, polls from 2016, the primary. I think it was like 2015 polls, actually. He spent 10 minutes going on, and people who were watching at home were like, what the heck is this? Why is he going on for 10 minutes about 2015 primary polls? But the audience there, the audience in the room, in the arena, was yucking it up. They were loving every little bit of what President Trump brought at that point in time. They thoroughly were engaged and were enthused and were just laughing along with him as he talked about primary polls from 2015. Nobody at home cares about that. The media certainly wouldn't. Honestly, I thought it was a little bit much, but most people were still absolutely riveted in that room as he was going on about polls. So he is trying to bring the greatest show on earth, certainly the greatest political show on earth, to your own home community because he wants that enthusiasm. That's why he got back out on the campaign trail so quickly to do these rallies, because he wanted to engage with and excite his base. Joe Biden knows that he can't engage with and excite his base remotely like President Trump, which is why nobody comes out to his events, to the extent he even wants people to come to the events given the COVID environment. But Biden recognizes that he's not good off the cuff. He's not as good on the campaign trail. He's missing some steps. Actually, COVID is the biggest gift to him, politically speaking, because it gives him an excuse to limit his public appearances, limit his exposure to tough questions and to crowds. So President Trump is doing a very different thing in terms of his strategy. And it's a base play. It's an enthusiasm play that also ties in, I think, with the greater Republican voter registration that we've seen. So don't count President Trump out if you're looking at polls and saying, oh, he's got a big gap from Biden. 2016 showed us that the polls can be misleading, and certainly the enthusiasm of the Trump base for him is greater than the enthusiasm of the Biden base for him. By far. The question is, will the antipathy towards President Trump bring out the support for Biden that he needs, the votes for Biden that he needs to overtake President Trump in reality? We will see how that turns out. But do not underestimate President Trump as he's now back on the campaign trail. Well, that is it for us today here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. My thanks to Mica Soellner at the Washington Examiner, and of course our friends at the Examiner on this Washington Examiner Wednesday, to producer for the day, Corby Wise, and of course to you for watching, listening, subscribing, and also most definitely liking and sharing videos like this one. We count on your support to help spread the word and grow the show. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day, and may God bless America.